The aim of this vidcast is to explain how to plan a detailed technical report and how to structure and write such a report. The first part of the workshop outlines introductory sections and illustrates the order of the report, explaining some of the terminology used. The vidcast continues by explaining the information that is required in the literature review and gives some suggestions of how to apply critical and reflective reading. The next section includes the spec, methodology and discussion, and then the vidcast leads on to the conclusion and recommendations. Finally, the vidcast will explain the importance of correct referencing throughout the report and how to apply the references at the end of the technical report. Please note that this is a guide and your coursework may not require all of the sections that are covered in this vidcast. This is an example of the terms that may be used in a detailed technical report. Obviously, every program will have its own conventions, so please ensure that you read your module guidelines on GCU Learn to ensure that you are applying the correct protocols. The terms used in this vidcast are generic, so you may wish to use specific ones that relate to your topic. Remember, though, that your external examiner should be able to understand the terms too, so that they can find their way round your report. Some programs actually specify the maximum number of words that should be used in a title. Try to aim for a short title to give the reader an indication of the content. It is important because you want to engage the reader from the beginning. The title page should include the title of the report, the information required by your program, the matriculation number, the year, the title of the project, and often a word count is noted at the bottom of the page. Generally, proformas are available on GCU Learn. A technical report's abstract briefly summarises the main aspects of the report, the methods employed, the major results, and the conclusions from those results. In essence, your reader should be able to read your abstract and have a good overview of your work. Your program will probably specify the total number of words for your abstract. This slide has suggested 250 words, but please check with your academic program and/or your supervisor. It is courtesy to acknowledge the help from your supervisor and any help that you have received from within and/or outside of the university. If you decide to put in a personal message thanking your immediate others for their support, please make it brief. This is not an Oscar-winning production. The contents page must be logical. Remember, your internal and even more importantly, the external examiner is not familiar with your work. They therefore need to find their way round your report easily. Make sure everything is labelled and that pages link correctly. For more advice on how to collate the report, you could make an appointment with the Learning Development Centre. The nomenclature is a Latin term that refers to any specialist terms that you may have used in the report. Some students prefer to use the term glossary instead. If you do use glossary, the glossary of terms should appear at the back of the report just before the references. These two slides link in that the first slide gives a subheading of introduction. The non-technical reader should be able to understand the introduction. This section is usually approximately 10% of the total word count and is a major section of your report. A strong introduction sets the scene and should capture the reader's interest. It is helpful to break down the objectives, and one method that is often used is applying SMART objectives. The next slide illustrates how these SMART objectives are linked. The objectives should be measurable in that they are specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, realistic and time-bound in that they can be achieved in the time allocated for producing your report. The project should also justify to your reader why this project has been selected. Why is it of interest? You may wish to specify the market and/or the audience or the clients. Finish the introductory section by clearly stating the hypothesis or the research questions that are to be discussed. The literature section is a very important section of the report. This section acknowledges the pre-existing work and indicates where your project slots in. It is helpful for the reader if this section commences with the project or design specification. You should briefly indicate the approach that has been taken in carrying out your research, whether it was primary and/or secondary research, whether specialist search engines were used, and which specialist journals. If you used site visits and/or interviews, you should also include this information. It is helpful for the reader to know how useful this information was. For example, did you decide to only refer to a certain time frame or a specific client group? Why did you decide to do this? Do not just explain what you did, justify the approach that you have taken. By justifying, this means not only writing a description, instead consider the writer's views and where the evidence to support these views and/or results. The next slide suggests particular information you may want to note down. This slide is a self-assessment of your skills when abstracting information for literature. If you feel you need any help in these areas, then why not contact the Learning Development Centre for an appointment, or in the case of help for databases, please contact the academic link librarians. Contacts details for both these groups are given on the last slide. The next two slides give some suggestions of different ways to read printed documents. It is important that you summarise the main points. Remember, you are representing the writer's thoughts, so you must ensure that this is carried out accurately and that you have referenced clearly the sources of your information. Please note that your reader will not be as familiar with your work as you, the writer, is, so ensure the content can be clearly understood by the reader. This slide emphasises the importance of checking over your notes. Have you accurately represented the original sources? The most important aspect is that your literature review should be relevant to your project. Your work's origins originate somewhere else. Where are the links? Why is the information in this literature review relevant to your project? Remember, before you read the literature, to have a series of questions. If you cannot think of any precise ones, perhaps the general questions this slide suggests will help. Your reader will judge the relevance of your comments on the supporting evidence from your literature review. Try and imagine you are justifying this project to an employer to be financed. Do you have sufficient evidence to support your ideas? This slide demonstrates a brief but essential section. Although it is only 5% of the word count, this reminds your reader why your project specification is exciting, innovative, individual, or an improvement on existing work. The design section is a major section in that it is 15% of the word count. This is a time when you sell your idea to the reader. You should be able to justify and explain your design using appropriate language, in that it should include technical language that is appropriate to your program. Remember to include all the aspects associated with your design. Use subheadings to guide the reader. If you are using tables and graphs or pictures, consider the size of these. Would they be better if they were in the appendices? Do they add or detract from your explanations? Explain and justify the strengths and weaknesses of your design as compared to the literature. More importantly, explain how you overcame the weaknesses or coped with them. It may be that you lost some important details or you were behind in your project. How did you overcome this, and have you detailed this in your Gantt chart? This slide explains a new technology that you are using. Again, although there is some description, it is expected that you are justifying and supporting the technology that is being applied. This section has 10% of your word count. Explain the technology's benefits, the industry standards, those that are being adopted and acknowledged, and the advantages of this technology. Likewise, if you are not adopting particular standards, why is that? Is that because of the client group, or financial constraints, or elements of time, or some other reason? At the end of this section, you should produce a design that is ready to be applied. This slide again is a shorter one in that it covers the implementation stage. This is the storyboard section of the project, and most of it should appear in appendices. However, the report should also refer to those appendices. As part of your evaluation, it is expected that you will carry out some kind of testing of your design, your product, your concept, simulation, etc. How did this happen? Did you ask fellow students or professionals or the public? What did you do? Did you use interviews, questionnaires and/or lab tests? Where is the evidence of the testing? Completed evidence should be shown in your appendices. Remember to also clearly label those and relate those to the appendices in your report. Examiners and employers are especially interested in how you overcame barriers in your project and how you reflected upon the process. There are some questions for you to consider in the slide. You may find it easier to answer the questions, or you may wish to approach it using a reflective model as illustrated in the next slide. These two slides are self-explanatory, but they are both freestanding in that your examiner should be able to read the conclusion and recommendations and clearly understand both sections without referring to the rest of the project. Why not use the program RefWorks for your referencing? Refer to the library website. Referencing is essential. If you do not reference, you will be accused of plagiarism. If you are unsure why you need to cite or reference, please refer to the university guidelines on plagiarism. Plagiarism is a serious offence, and in extreme cases you may be put off the course. For more guidance on referencing, please refer to your module guidelines. These will be available on GCU Learn. Or make an appointment with the Academic Learning Development Centre. We are based in M534B in the George Moore Building. There are a number of common problems that appear in students' writing. These include incorrect referencing in the text and in the references at the end of the essay. Why not type your references in the text in a different colour and check that they are correct before you submit the coursework? Remember, of course, to change the colour back to black before submitting. If you are unsure about how to complete your references at the end of the coursework, please check your guidelines. We also have examples in hard copies available outside M534B. Your lecturer may give feedback saying that there is too much descriptive writing and little analysis. This means that you are explaining too much about the theories or studies and not comparing or critically reviewing these. Your mark can be strongly affected by your style of writing. Try to vary your use of language. Use a thesaurus and/or a dictionary to expand your vocabulary. Watch the length of your sentences. If they are too short, then use some linking words. On the other hand, if your sentence has too many clauses, then it can be difficult for your reader to follow your argument or discussion. Try not to use too many quotations. Your lecturer wants you to paraphrase. This means writing in your own words, but you must always state your source. If you decide to use a quote, then it should be short and relevant. Remember to reference all your ideas, otherwise this is plagiarism. Try and avoid everyday or casual language, such as "this was done to the client." When you are writing coursework at university, there is an expectation by your lecturer that you will apply the appropriate terminology that is used on your programme. When you read journal articles, you will have noticed that they are written in a formal language, and your coursework should also reflect that style. Try to be specific in your writing. If you use phrases such as many authors or several authors, your lecturer will almost certainly expect a number of references to be listed. Plus, can you provide evidence that there are a number of authors? Have you truly reflected the author's meanings and intentions? It is easy for a lecturer to identify when you are merely filling the report with words or descriptive writing. This is referred to as padding. So in essence, a good quality, detailed technical report should be cautious in its tone as you are supporting or suggesting a concept, an idea or programme, but you are not giving the absolute answer. Your ideas all have to be referenced with evidence and should be written in a coherent and interesting style. For more assistance in writing literature review, please refer to the vidcast on writing a literature review.